The old wooden box felt heavier than it looked, the worn edges smooth under my fingertips. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sun, slanting through my living room window as I finally managed to pry the lid open. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed letters and faded trinkets, was our family photo album. I hadn't looked at it in years, not since everything changed. My older brother, Daniel, had called me a few days ago, his voice unusually subdued. "Hey, Ethan, got a minute?" he'd asked, and right then, a little alarm bell had gone off in my head. Daniel rarely called just to chat. There was usually an agenda, a favor to ask, or more often than not, a problem he needed me to solve. "Sure, what's up?" I'd replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "So, you know how I've been wanting to start that landscaping business? Here it comes," I thought, bracing myself. Daniel had a knack for grand ideas that never quite materialized, usually due to a lack of planning or, let's be honest, a lack of funds. "Yeah, I remember you mentioning it," I said cautiously. "Well, I found this great opportunity," he continued, his voice gaining a bit of its usual enthusiasm. "A guy I know is selling his old equipment, a truck, a couple of mowers, the whole shebang, for a really good price. But I need a little help with the down payment." A little help. That phrase always made my stomach clench. With Daniel, a little often meant a significant chunk of my savings. "How much are we talking about, Dan?" I asked, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. "Just 5,000, he said quickly, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "I know it's a lot, but I promise I'll pay you back as soon as the business gets going. This is it, Ethan, my chance to finally be my own boss." $5,000 was a lot of money to me. I'd been working hard for years, carefully saving for a rainy day, or maybe even a down payment on a small cabin by the lake I'd always dreamed of. Lending that much to Daniel felt risky, to say the least. He had a history of borrowing money and being less than prompt with repayment. "I don't know, Dan," I said hesitantly. "That's a pretty big chunk." "Come on, man, you're the only one I can turn to," he pleaded. "Mom and Dad can't help, you know how they are. And I wouldn't ask if I wasn't serious about this. This time is different, I swear." That last part, "this time is different," echoed in my ears. I'd heard it before countless times with countless other ventures that had fizzled out like damp fireworks. Still, there was a part of me, the eternally hopeful younger brother, that wanted to believe him. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this was the thing that would finally give Daniel some stability. "Let me think about it, okay?" I said, buying myself some time. "Thanks, Ethan, you're a lifesaver," he'd replied, the relief palpable in his voice. I knew I could count on you. That conversation had been nagging at me ever since. I'd been going back and forth in my head, weighing the pros and cons, trying to decide what to do. That's why I'd pulled out the old photo album. Sometimes, looking back at the past can help you make sense of the present. I flipped through the pages, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. There we were, two goofy kids with missing teeth and matching bowl cuts, grinning at the camera. There was Dad, looking younger and less burdened, his arm around Mom, her smile bright and carefree. The early years seemed so simple, so full of promise. But as I turned more pages, the tone shifted. The smiles seemed a little strained, the laughter a little less frequent. There were pictures of Daniel in his high school football uniform, looking confident and popular. He'd always been the charismatic one, the golden boy who could charm his way out of anything. I, on the other hand, had always been the quiet, studious one, content to stay out of the spotlight. Then I saw it. A picture from Daniel's college graduation. He was shaking hands with the dean, a proud smile on his face. Mom and Dad were beaming in the background. But what caught my eye was the inscription on the photo, written in Mom's elegant handwriting. "To our wonderful Daniel, with love and pride. We know you'll do great things." I flipped through the following pages, looking for my own graduation pictures. There were a few tucked away towards the back. I was smiling, relieved to have finally finished my degree. But there was no picture with Mom and Dad, just a quick snapshot taken by a friend. And there was no inscription, no words of pride or encouragement. Just the photo, silent and forgotten. A familiar pang of hurt resonated in my chest. It wasn't that I hadn't known, on some level, that Daniel was always their favorite. It was just that seeing it so starkly, so clearly documented in our family history, brought the reality crashing down on me all over again. It was a pattern that had played out my entire life, big and small. Daniel got the new bike. I got the hand-me-down. Daniel's mistakes were excused as youthful indiscretions. Mine were met with disappointment. And then there was the money. Daniel had always been financially irresponsible, a trait that Mom and Dad had often enabled. They'd bailed him out of countless jams over the years, always with the same refrain. "He's our son, we have to help him." And I, the responsible one, the one who always paid his own way, was often left feeling like my hard work and careful planning didn't matter. I remembered a few years ago when Daniel had wanted to start a different business, a short-lived venture selling novelty t-shirts online. He'd asked Mom and Dad for a loan, a significant amount that they'd readily provided. The business had flopped within 6 months, and the loan was never fully repaid. I'd needed a new car around that time, and when I'd asked for a small contribution, I'd been told that money was tight. The memory stung, sharp and familiar. It wasn't about the money itself, but about the underlying message. Daniel's dreams, however fleeting, were worth investing in. Mine were not. I closed the photo album, the weight of it feeling heavier than before. It wasn't just a small loan Daniel was asking for. It was history repeating itself. It was the same old pattern of him needing help, and me, the reliable younger brother, being expected to provide it, while our parents stood by, either unable or unwilling to step in. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I wanted to help Daniel, I really did. Part of me still held onto that childhood ideal of brotherhood, of being there for each other no matter what. But another part of me, the part that had learned to be cautious and self-protective, was screaming a warning. I got up and walked over to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The leaves on the trees were just starting to turn golden, a reminder that fall was just around the corner. Time was passing, and I was still stuck in this familiar dilemma. My phone buzzed, breaking my train of thought. It was a text from Daniel. "Hey, just checking in. Any thoughts on the loan?" I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What could I say? Yes, I'd give him the money, knowing full well that it might disappear into another failed venture, and that I'd likely never see it again? Or no, I couldn't this time, risking his disappointment and maybe even his resentment. I thought about the inscription in the photo album, the unspoken favoritism that had always been there. I thought about the times I'd been overlooked, the times my efforts had gone unnoticed. And I thought about my own dreams, the cabin by the lake, the feeling of finally having something that was truly mine, earned through my own hard work. The answer, when it finally came, felt heavy but also strangely liberating. I couldn't keep enabling this pattern, not just for Daniel's sake, but for my own. I needed to draw a line, to prioritize my own well-being for once. I typed out a reply, my heart pounding slightly. "Hey Dan, I've been thinking about it. It's just not a good time for me to lend that much money right now. I have some unexpected expenses coming up." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Almost immediately, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I took a deep breath and answered. "Ethan, what do you mean? I thought you were going to help me out." His voice was tight with disappointment, just as I'd expected. "I'm sorry, Dan," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "Things have come up, and I just can't do it right now." "Things have come up? What things? You know how important this is to me." "I do, but I have my own responsibilities too," I replied, the words feeling foreign and yet right at the same time. "So, you're just going to leave me hanging?" There was an edge of anger in his voice now. "I'm not leaving you hanging, Dan. I just can't lend you that much money right now. Maybe you could look into a small business loan or talk to Mom and Dad again. You know they can't help. That's why I asked you. I understand, but I just can't this time," I repeated, holding my ground. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Daniel's mind racing, trying to come up with another angle, another way to convince me. "So, that's it," he finally said, his voice flat. "You're just saying no?" "Yes, Dan. I am. Another silence. Then a sigh. "All right," he said, his tone resigned. "Thanks for nothing, Ethan." The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, the silence in my apartment suddenly deafening. I'd done it. I finally said no. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a pang of guilt. Had I done the right thing? Was I being selfish? I walked back over to the window and looked out at the street again. The golden leaves seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, as if acknowledging the small shift that had just occurred. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had chosen myself. But I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Daniel wouldn't give up that easily, and I had a feeling that Mom and Dad would be hearing about this very soon. The storm was brewing, and I was standing right in the middle of it. I just hoped I had the strength to weather it. The photo album lay open on the coffee table, a silent reminder of the patterns I was trying to break free from. The next call I was sure would be from Mom, and that conversation I knew would be a whole different ballgame. The phone rang again about an hour later. Just as I'd predicted, Mom's name flashed across the screen. I took another deep breath and answered, bracing myself for the emotional onslaught I knew was coming. "Ethan? Daniel told me you wouldn't help him," she said, her voice laced with a familiar blend of disappointment and accusation. There was no, "Hello? No, how are you?" Just straight to the point, as always. "Yeah, Mom, that's right," I replied, trying to sound firm but not confrontational. "But why? You know how much this means to him. This could be his big break." "I know, Mom, but I just can't afford to lend him that much money right now. I have my own expenses to worry about." "Your own expenses? What expenses could possibly be more important than helping your brother get his life on track?" She made it sound like I was being deliberately obstructive, like I was somehow enjoying Daniel's struggles. "Mom, I've helped Daniel out a lot over the years," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "And every time it's the same thing. He promises to pay me back, but he never does. I can't keep doing this." "But this time is different," she insisted, echoing Daniel's earlier words. "He's really serious about this. You have to believe me." "I want to believe him, Mom, I really do, but I've heard that before. And frankly, I'm tired of being the one who always bails him out. Where were you and Dad when he needed help with the down payment? Why is it always on me?" There was a brief silence. I knew I'd hit a nerve. Mom didn't like being confronted with her and Dad's role in Daniel's financial woes. They preferred to see me as the responsible one who should always be willing to help. "We've helped Daniel in the past," she said defensively. "And we would now, but things are a little tight for us at the moment." "Right?" I said, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "Tight for you, but apparently not tight enough to help him with his previous ventures." "Ethan, don't be like that," she chided. "Your brother needs you. Family sticks together." "Family sticks together," I repeated, the words feeling hollow. "That's funny, Mom, because lately, I haven't felt much like part of this family. I feel more like an ATM." The silence on the other end was heavy, thick with unspoken resentments and long-held grievances. I knew I was saying things I probably shouldn't, but the words just kept tumbling out, fueled by years of feeling overlooked and underappreciated. "What's that supposed to mean?" she finally asked, her voice dangerously low. "It means that I'm always the one who's expected to help, to give, to be understanding. But when I need something or when I say no, suddenly I'm the bad guy. I'm the selfish one." "That's not fair, Ethan," she protested, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. I could tell that, deep down, she knew there was some truth to what I was saying. "Isn't it?" I countered. "Think about it, Mom. When was the last time you or Dad asked me about my dreams, my goals? It's always about Daniel, about what he needs, what he wants." The silence stretched on, punctuated only by our breathing. I could feel the tension radiating through the phone line. "Look, Ethan," she said finally, her tone softening slightly, "I know things haven't always been perfect, but Daniel is your brother. You need to support him." "I do support him, Mom. I've supported him for years. But I can't keep sacrificing my own financial security for his sake." He needs to learn to be responsible for his own life. So, you're just going to let him fail? She asked, her voice rising again. No, Mom. I'm not going to let him fail. He's capable of figuring things out on his own. Maybe this will even be a good thing for him. Maybe he'll finally learn to budget and plan if he knows he can't always rely on me to bail him out. You're being so stubborn, she said, her voice laced with exasperation. Just think about it, Ethan. Please. I have thought about it, Mom, and my answer is still no. Fine, she said, her voice cold and hard. If that's how you want to be. But don't come crying to us when you need something. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. When had I ever gone to them for anything? When had they ever been there for me in a meaningful way? I won't, I said simply, and hung up the phone. This time, the silence that followed felt different. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the feeling of a chapter finally closing. I knew that my relationship with my family had just shifted, perhaps irrevocably. But I also felt a sense of resolve. I had stood my ground. I had put my own needs first. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. The next few weeks were interesting. Daniel didn't call again, but Mom made sure to keep me updated on his progress, or rather, his lack thereof. She'd call with thinly veiled complaints about how hard he was trying, how close he was to securing the equipment, if only he had that little bit of extra cash. She'd even try to guilt-trip me by mentioning how disappointed Dad was in my lack of support for my brother. But I held firm. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. Then came the Sunday dinners. They were a staple of our family life, a weekly gathering at Mom and Dad's house that I usually attended out of habit and a sense of obligation. But after my conversation with Mom, I knew things would be different. I decided to skip the first Sunday dinner after our argument, sending a brief text saying I wasn't feeling well. The following week, I simply didn't reply to Mom's usual invitation. The silence from them was deafening. Usually, my absence would have been met with a barrage of calls and messages. But this time, there was nothing. It was as if they were testing me, waiting to see how long I would hold out. Or maybe, just maybe, they were finally starting to understand that I was serious. About a month after my conversation with Daniel, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my grandmother, their mother. Her handwriting was shaky and frail, but the message was clear. She was worried about the family, about the rift that seemed to be growing between us. She urged me to reconsider, to forgive and forget, reminding me that family was the most important thing in the world. I felt a pang of guilt as I read her letter. I loved my grandmother, and I knew she meant well. But she didn't know the whole story, the years of feeling like the second-class son. It wasn't just about this one loan. It was about a lifetime of subtle and not-so-subtle favoritism. I decided to call her. Her voice was weak but warm when she answered. We talked for a while, and I tried to explain my perspective without sounding bitter or resentful. She listened patiently, and while I don't think I completely changed her mind, I felt like she understood a little better where I was coming from. Life settled into a new rhythm. I focused on my work, spent more time with friends who appreciated me for who I was, and even started looking into those cabin listings by the lake again. It felt good to be prioritizing my own happiness for a change. Then, about 3 months after Daniel's request, I got another call. This time, it was from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, Ethan? Is that you? The voice on the other end sounded strained, almost panicked. Took me a moment to recognize it. It was Daniel. Dan? What's wrong? I asked, my heart sinking. It's Mom, he said, his voice trembling. She had a fall. She's in the hospital. My blood ran cold. What happened? Is she okay? She was getting out of the shower, and she slipped. She hit her head pretty badly. They're running some tests now. Oh my God, Dan. I'm so sorry. Which hospital is she in? I'll come right away. He told me the name and address, and I hung up, my mind racing. All the recent distance, all the unresolved arguments, suddenly felt insignificant. This was my mother. I drove to the hospital as fast as I could, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. When I arrived, I found Daniel in the waiting room, looking pale and distraught. "Any news?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head. "Not yet. They're still doing tests. Dad's inside with her." We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the sterile environment of the hospital amplifying our anxiety. Finally, a doctor came out, his expression serious. "Mr. and Mr.?" he began, looking at Daniel and me. "This is my brother Ethan," Daniel said quickly. "And I'm Daniel. We're her sons." "All right, your mother has suffered a mild concussion. We're going to keep her here overnight for observation, but she should be able to go home tomorrow." A wave of relief washed over me. Could have been so much worse. "Can we see her?" I asked. "She's resting right now, but you can see her briefly. Just don't tire her out." We followed the doctor to Mom's room. She was lying in bed, looking pale and weak, with a bandage on her forehead. Dad was sitting by her side, holding her hand. When she saw us, a faint smile flickered across her lips. "Ethan," she said softly. "Daniel, you came." "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Daniel went over to her and took her other hand. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "A little groggy," she replied, "but I'll be all right." We stayed for a few minutes, just talking quietly, reassuring her that we were there. In that moment, all the old resentments seemed to fade away. We were just a family worried about our mother. The next day, Mom was released from the hospital. Daniel and I took turns staying with her, helping her with whatever she needed. It was strange being back in that familiar dynamic, but there was also a sense of peace, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this crisis had brought us a little closer. One afternoon, when I was at their house, Mom asked me to sit down with her in the living room. Dad was out running errands. "Ethan," she began, her voice a little hesitant. I wanted to talk to you about Daniel." "Here we go," I thought. "He's really struggling with this landscaping business," she continued. "He found a truck, just like he said, but the guy wanted cash, and, well, you know." I nodded, bracing myself for the inevitable request. "He's really disappointed that you couldn't help him out," she said, looking at me with those familiar pleading eyes. "Mom, we've been through this," I said, trying to keep my tone gentle but firm. "I just couldn't do it." She sighed. I know, but, well, he's been talking about it a lot. And he mentioned something about how you always got what you wanted and he always got the leftovers." My eyebrows shot up in surprise. "That was unexpected." "He said that?" I asked. She nodded. "He did. And, well, it made me think. Maybe we haven't always been fair." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths and years of ingrained patterns. This was the closest Mom had ever come to acknowledging the favoritism that had always existed in our family. "Mom," I said softly, "it's not about getting what I wanted. It's about feeling seen, feeling valued. Daniel has always been the center of attention, and that's okay. But sometimes, it felt like I was invisible." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh, Ethan," she said, reaching out and taking my hand. "I never meant for you to feel that way. We love you both so much." I squeezed her hand. "I know, Mom, but sometimes, love isn't enough. Sometimes you need to show it in different ways." We sat in silence for a few moments, the unspoken words hanging between us. Then, Mom said, Maybe we can try to do better." A small glimmer of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe, just maybe, things could actually change. A few weeks later, Daniel called me again. This time, his voice didn't sound strained or desperate. "Hey, Ethan," he said. "Got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" I replied, a sense of cautious optimism filling me. "So, remember that landscaping equipment I was telling you about?" Here we go again, I thought, but I kept my mouth shut. "Well," he continued, "I ended up finding a different set. It wasn't quite as fancy, but it was a lot more affordable. And I managed to get a small loan from the bank." My jaw dropped slightly. Daniel getting a loan from the bank? That was definitely a first. "That's great, Dan," I said, genuinely surprised and happy for him. Yeah, it is, he said, a hint of pride in his voice. I even landed my first couple of clients. Slow going, but I'm doing it. I'm really proud of you, Dan, I said, and I meant it. Thanks, Ethan. And, hey, I wanted to say I know I was a jerk about the loan. I appreciate you, for always being there for me in the past. And, well, maybe I need to figure things out on my own for a while. His words surprised me even more than the loan. It sounded like he was actually taking responsibility, actually growing up. I think that's a good idea, Dan, I said. But I'm still here for you if you need anything. Just, maybe not financially for a bit. He chuckled. Yeah, I get it. Thanks, man. We talked for a little longer about his new business, about Mom's recovery, about life in general. It felt different, lighter, more like the easy camaraderie we used to share as kids. Life isn't perfect. My relationship with my family is still a work in progress. There are still moments when I feel that familiar pang of being the overlooked one. But things are changing slowly but surely. Mom and Dad are making an effort to be more aware of my feelings, to ask about my life. And Daniel seems to be finally finding his own way.